Good morning. I'm David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Director for the Tennessean and the USA Today Network Tennessee. Today we have the pleasure of having Vice Mayor Jim Shulman of Nashville-Davidson County. This is part of a public service that we're doing to interview countywide candidates for mayor, vice mayor, and at-large Metro Council. We'll be talking about Mr. Shulman's campaign, why he's running for re-election. He's been in office for about a year or so now. He took over in a special election, and also what he sees ahead for the future. So thank you very much, Vice Mayor Shulman. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So you've been in your seat for about a year. You
About
were
a year.
an at-large Metro Council member. You won a special election, and in this past year doing this job, why do you want to keep on doing it for another 4 years?
That may be a very good question. Initially I never really thought I would ever want to be vice mayor because you don't get a vote unless it's a tie and you don't bring legislation. And I thought, why would I want to give that up? I think the idea is sometimes after looking at the position, by being the vice mayor, sometimes you have a better, you're in a better position to try to actually get things done. And what I mean by that is procedurally, as you run the council, but also making sure that the right people are looking at issues, making sure the committee structure works, and that the committees themselves on the council are actually focused on issues, and then really trying to hold everybody accountable so that we actually can see, if we're concerned about affordable housing or education or the budget, what did we do about it? What do we want to do about it? And then do we actually get those things done? And so when I looked at running last year, I thought, okay, let's give that a try. Let's see if we can actually come up with some things that will actually work. It's a short time frame, a special election, 1 year. We've got some things in place to start that. I'd like a full term to actually see if we can actually get those things accomplished. That's why I'm kind of running again. Yeah.
And probably the biggest conversation I hear these days is how is it that Nashville's booming, yet the city's having trouble balancing its budget?
Yeah.
And you just had a major vote in the council. Could you take us through that process of what were some of the conversations and how you ultimately got to where you got today?
So one of the things I really wanted to do, and I don't think we were as effective as we should have been, but the budget is the most important thing that the council votes for. It should be a year-round process. We get the mayor's budget on May the 1st. And then we start having budget hearings that take a while through May, and then we start having meetings to talk about the budget. And then we have until the end of June to figure out if we're going to pass a budget or to pass the mayor's budget or substitute it or amend it or whatever we do. It really should be a year-round process, particularly after what's happening in this city, which is we have tremendous economic development going on. We're a city that's growing, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And people are going like, why do we not have any money? So we've spent some time trying to figure all that stuff out. And you can go back to, some of the things that happened in 2010 with pushing off some of the debt. You can look at, what's happened with some of the property tax reappraisals. Did that make a difference? People get mad because they see the draft stuff happening, and they look at all the people that come and they go, how could that not impact the city? And then you talk about the tourist development zone. There's all kinds of different issues that people have brought up over time. And it's fine to bring those things up. And we keep looking at them. But in the end, we didn't have the money last year to provide the 3% COLA increases that we had promised Metro employees. I think what we have to do is kind of step back, and that's what happened over the last year was that people, when David Briley became mayor, one of the first things he looked at was, okay, what situation am I in and what can I do about this budget? The council at that point was taking a look at, do we need to readjust that property tax rate, which we had not done the year before. We have, ever since I remembered being on the council, every 4 years when there's a reappraisal, we have to lower the tax rate because we can't bring in new revenues based upon just the reappraisal. So the tax rate gets lowered, and then it gets readjusted up a little bit so that we have enough revenues to cover things that we need to cover for the next 3 or 4 years. That didn't happen 2 years ago. When Megan Berry was mayor, That rate went to the lowest rate it's ever been in Metro history. And I think there was a lot of people at that point that felt the city is booming. We don't need that. You know, we're in good shape. We're bringing in about $100 million in new revenue. What happened was we got hit with all these different things happening at the same time, including a lot of that debt consolidation. And all of a sudden that money just disappears. It's expensive to give everybody a 3% raise. Education is always going to need additional money. Mm-hmm. And so over the last year we've been talking about it. Obviously there was an attempt to readjust that property tax rate a year ago. Didn't work, but we've been talking about it through, and then lo and behold, in an election year, council members looked at it again and said, you know what, we need to put it back on the table because it may be the right thing to do. And after a lot of discussion, and there were 4 substitute budgets this time, and we ended up voting on Councilmember Tanaka Vercher's substitute budget. She was the budget chair, and needed 21 votes to pass, and it got 20 votes, so it failed. So for the first time in Metro history, the Metro Council did not substitute its own budget. Under the charter, the mayor's budget becomes law if the council doesn't pass one by June 30th, and that's what happened. So in a very historic vote, that 20 vote margin, that 20 votes, losing by 1, we actually made history either way. Either we were going to pass a budget that was very, very different from the mayor's, or we weren't going to pass a budget at all. And we ended up not passing a budget at all.
And you're still going to deal with the implications of that over the next year. So if you're reelected, you'll be dealing with the fact that this budget was balanced with a parking solution that has not been considered by the council yet. And how do you talk to your constituents about that?
So it's very interesting. So we started talking about it before we ever had that vote. So one of the things I think is most important for the vice mayor to do is to continue to try to find ways to get information out to the public, to the council as well, make sure the council has what it needs to make those proper decisions, but to get that information out to the public the best way we can. And that parking thing came up. People didn't understand it. They didn't like it. You know, and there hasn't been enough information out on it, and we haven't, the council really hasn't had it yet. The bill started moving and then it was withdrawn. So there hasn't been that issue has not been fully discussed at this point by the council. Yet it's in the budget, again, that the Metro Council didn't pass, but it's in the mayor's budget. So it's $30 million for next year. And then there's $11.5 million that comes from selling the district energy facility. That hasn't been discussed yet either. So there's what, roughly $41.5 million that hasn't been approved yet by separate ordinance, but is actually in the budget that actually is now operating in Metro government. So what do? You talk to people about it. You keep explaining it to people. At some point, we'll have a different council, obviously, in September and October. Those issues are going to have to come back on the table. We can't operate under a budget that has a $40 million, right now we call it a $40 million hole because we haven't approved it yet. We're going to have to deal with that when we come back. So I think the idea is to keep an eye on us, because at some point, in order to fill that budget hole, we actually have to pass 2 ordinances. One is for that privatization of the parking, and the other one is for the sale of the district energy facility. And we haven't done that yet. So again, we talk about it. You know, one of the things we always were told years ago when I was coming up through government is that you don't sell assets, one-time assets, for recurring expenses, because that gets you in trouble down the road. Whoever comes back on this council, whoever is the mayor, whoever is the vice mayor, we've got an issue sitting there looking at us right in front of us. You're going to have a series of new council members that come on, and we're going to have to quickly, or whoever it is, whoever is elected vice mayor, is going to have to quickly get people up to speed, because we've got issues pending right as the new council gets seated.
Let's clarify one thing. For some readers, sometimes they think that the vice mayor works for the mayor, and
Right.
the vice mayor does not work for the mayor.
Right.
It's a separate elected office. How is your relationship with the mayor, and what is the ideal relationship you would have with the mayor's office?
Yeah, so the vice mayor, I would say, works for the people, but it also works for the council. It does not run on the same ticket as the mayor, so completely separate. Relationship with the mayor is good. We can always be stronger, but it also, again, I don't work for the mayor, so I don't run. Again, it's not like we're in sync. A lot of times I'll have a different opinion than the mayor. So we meet once a month. We actually sit down once a month and we go over kind of what things are pending. But I also have his phone number, and I can get in touch with his staff, and I can go through things if there's an issue floating around. I think the ideal situation is, we probably need to meet more than once a month. It may even need to be once a week, because there are so many things happening in Nashville just to kind of keep up with it. And then there has to be that free flow of information. So I am always more than happy to talk to people. Some people think I talk way too much, but I'm always happy to talk to the mayor, to the council members pursuant to statute that I'm allowed to talk to them, to the public, because the more information out there, the more information we can share back and forth, the better it is, and we can make sure that that information, if it's conveyed to me, I can get it out to the council members so they actually have some understanding. One of the things that I would say is, one of the things that I would, if I come back as vice mayor, what I would really like to see done is that, particularly on the big issues, privatization of parking, that district energy sale, anything that really is substantial, and we've got one now floating right now with the Bells Bend property. When those discussions start, I know sometimes they're in initial draft stages, but sometimes we get the information towards the end of the process, and then we're trying to hurry to catch up and figure out what's happened over the last several months that we didn't know anything about. And then we have to make a decision. I don't like that. I didn't like it as a council member. I like it as vice mayor on behalf of the council, because you want your council getting as much information as they need. You want them to be able to ask whatever questions they have, get the information in a timely fashion, and then make a good, sound decision on an important issue. That Bells Bend property, I think, is probably pretty important. But I think one of the things people would say is, okay, why now? And where's the money coming from? And we just had this big budget battle. How does it all fit together? We need as much information as we can to be able to make a good decision on that.
So if you're elected vice mayor, re-elected vice mayor, you have had also the experience of being a district council member and an at-large council member. You're likely to have quite a bit of turnover in the council. What would be your ideal approach to essentially teaching, mentoring, orienting the new council so that you can accomplish what you are talking about?
So two things that I've thought about, but again, I got to get reelected first. But there would be two things, and I would tell whoever is elected vice mayor the same thing. One is that I think you have an initial retreat that's obviously open, but you bring in the new council members, first of all, to introduce themselves to each other. But also, you may have 20 new members. You may have more than that. Who knows? You just got elected to the council. What does that mean? What does it mean to you, to your family? How do you treat other council members? How do you act appropriately on the floor? What's your relationship, with the mayor's office and the department heads? How do you hold a community meeting? What is basically expected of you? So, we had a 39-page calendar the other night. We were there until 1:45 in the morning. 16 of those pages were public hearings for zoning matters. A lot of those were uncontested, which is fine. But some of them are contested. So what should a district council member do before they come up with a zoning matter? They should have community meetings. They should have discussed this. So when we look back there, it's kind of like the councilmanic courtesy thing. People get mad at us over that, but if a council member does what they're supposed to do, if they make sure that their district, on a zoning matter in their district, if they have sufficient meetings, and if they make sure that everybody understands what the issues are, and they work it out, or they don't bring it because people are not comfortable with it, it saves the whole council a lot of time and agony trying to figure out what's happening in somebody's district. So I think the first retreat would be, okay, again, you just got elected. Again, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. The other thing I'll tell you is that we want council members to understand the meeting schedule and that they got elected to this and they're going to show up. Okay, mm-hmm. They're going to show up. They ran for this office. They're going to show up at the committee meetings. They're going to show up at the council meetings, and again, they're going to be prepared. You know, there's an agenda and there's an analysis, and so we're going to make sure they understand how that whole process works. Second retreat, which would be, you know, maybe a week or two later. So once they understand what their role is, then I think the idea is to start going through issues. And I would do it a little bit different. I've always liked the TED Talk concept, mm-hmm. because they say you can only take so much information in a certain amount of time. So you take an issue like transit. I mean, we could spend hours on transit, but after about 45 minutes, you start getting confused about, you know, the differences between how we would pay for a regional plan or a city plan. So I think we would try to do like a TED Talk format on specific issues, and whether it's homelessness, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's education. Find somebody who is really good, who could talk in 15 minutes and kind of lay out the specific issues from a general standpoint, because obviously you can't drill down that much in 15 minutes, but what do the council members basically need to know about the specific issues? And do it in 15 minutes. We can always do more later, but we want them to be well-rounded when they start working on this stuff. And then at some point, based upon what we just talked about, they're going to be hit with issues as soon as they walk in that door. Mm-hmm. What do they need to know about it? And you know, there are so many issues floating around. Right now, people are just trying to run to get into office, but once they get in, they're going to immediately be thrown with votes on some pretty important issues, and they need to understand what they're voting on.
I'd love to take you back for a moment to late 2017.
Yeah.
We had a long conversation about short-term rentals, and you were charged by then Vice Mayor David Briley to come up with some compromise, and it was very painful. I remember talking about it. What are some of the lessons you learned from that, and how you would approach in the future compromises on very difficult issue, being short-term rentals or something else?
That was a tough issue, and people were mad on both sides. And I had that belief that if you could just get people to sit down and talk to each other and make them both mad, then you would come up with something that would work, and then everybody would be happy. Didn't really work very well. Learned a lot about sometimes there's not really an easy answer or an easy way to compromise. What I did learn was that sometimes you have to go back to the very beginning and start with some of the basic facts and then start working your way back towards the middle. There'll be issues like that, you know, for the next council. I think part of the idea of the retreats was to get people to start working together from day one. And so, you know, we're limited by state law about talking to each other outside of publicly recorded meetings in terms of issues, but I do want, I would like to see the council in some way, and this may sound silly, but to bond as a group early on. And what that simply means is, you know, they go out to dinner with each other in a group setting. You get to talk to each other. When I was a district council member many, many years ago, you know, we would have arguments on the floor just like we do now. But then most of us go out to dinner. And the people I had just argued with on the floor were the people I was sitting right across the table from. So you had a good relationship with people, and you knew that you could be friends even if you disagreed with it on issues. You want council members to be heard, but you also want people to respect each other. So it comes back to the civility thing. You want people to feel comfortable about talking through issues, whether it's short-term rental property or something else. You want people to be passionate if they are like that, but you also want them to understand that sometimes you may have to sit down with the person on the other side, come up with some solution for the betterment of the entire city. So, don't want to go through that short-term rental thing again. That was not that much fun.
You know, it was definitely a tough issue, and one of the big issues. You know, one of the things that's also coming up that's now under your watch is the Community Oversight Board.
Right.
And the state legislature changed the law this past year, so requiring that the Metro Council be the one that would, if there is a request for a subpoena, be the one that approved that. Have you thought about how you would approach that should that come up?
I think it probably involves the same type of thing in terms of quickly, or maybe even during the retreat, you know, again, you ran for this council term. We have 35 district council members, so they're focused on stuff going inside of their district. But they're voting. When they vote, just like the at-larges, they're voting on something on behalf of the entire city as a whole. So on something like this is going to involve people thinking through this as a city. How does this, what's the implication? How do we vote on this? How do we get the information we need to be able to figure out what to do? I thought the Community Oversight Board was a good idea, and I put my name on the petition. I voted for it. Mainly because there seems to be a communication gap somewhere in this stuff, and people are getting upset over it. Sometimes you just have to put everything on the table and say, you know what, this is a problem. Let's talk about it and figure out how we resolve it. So I think the idea of making sure, first of all, that the council understands what the Community Oversight Board does and what its role is, because we just approved money for it. I think that's one of the groups that we may invite to the TED Talk, you know, and actually let them explain what they do. But part of that process needs to be, there are going to be times where the council has to step in and do something. You need to understand what the process is, and then we need to make sure people understand what they're doing and what they'll be voting for if that happens. So we'll see.
There's been a lot of talk from different groups that I've been to and at forums that I've been to about trust and transparency and trust in Metro government. Obviously, the reason you're in your position is because of a mayoral scandal that created this domino effect of different positions. How are you handling those conversations, and what more needs to be done in order to help citizens become more attuned and feeling more trustworthy of government?
I think the best thing is information and education. I think again, when we were talking about early on bringing the council members together and talking about community meetings, as much as we try sometimes to get word out, sometimes people they're either not listening or they're not paying attention, or they're just not, you know, we're not hitting the right types of medium to get to everybody. We have to keep trying to figure out how to inform voters. You know, when the discussions were coming up on the budget and the property tax, I would have thought we would have had lots and lots of people engaged in that, because it's a personal thing. I mean, it's going to involve money out of their pocketbooks. It was hard to get people's attention, and I'm not sure how many people were paying attention. Even though we'd been talking about it for a year, it was like, this is right in front of us. We want your feedback. You know, we know people don't necessarily like paying higher property taxes, but we were hearing from lots of people who were saying, we need to do this. We've got teacher pay low. We need to take care of teachers. We're concerned about education. How do we do it? We are always looking for better ways to inform. And I think that's one of the major, I said there were three objectives when I go out and talk to people, three objectives I want to do if I come back as vice mayor. And the first one is inform. Not only the council, but the public. They have got to know what we're doing. You know, we may have talked about this before. You feel so disattached from the federal government sometimes. I mean, the average citizen doesn't have much say on whether, you know, we raise tariffs on goods coming from China, or whether we should do something about, you know, a foreign country crisis. We kind of watch it, and we can be upset, but there's not much we can do about it. State government is still kind of removed. You may know who your state rep is or state senator, but sometimes you don't necessarily know what they're doing. But your councilman lives, you know, somewhere within your neighborhood or not too far away from it, And that pothole that needs fixing or that school that is having trouble, you can go find your council member and do stuff. Local government is very important. We just got to figure out better ways to make sure people are informed as to what's going on.
So one of the big issues that you're contending with is the scooter issue. And there's been a request by the mayor to consider a moratorium or a different, right. And where do you see that going?
So that was going to be interesting because in that marathon meeting the other night, the council did two things. It actually rejected the mayor's proposal, and it passed a substitute proposed by Council Lady Vercher that decreases the size or the number of scooters and then starts trying to put some additional enforcement and structure on this thing. One of the big problems with this is that we don't really have any enforcement. So, I was having lunch yesterday, I saw somebody driving a scooter or riding a scooter on the street, which is a good thing. They were on a one-way street going the wrong way. Most of the time you see them on the sidewalks, and what really bothers me is when you just see them lying all over the sidewalks. Got to be in some enforcement for that. So the council is still working through that. That bill is going to come up on third reading at the next council meeting, which is next Tuesday, which would be July 16th. So it'll be at the next council meeting on July 16th. But they also passed another bill right behind it on second reading, which is Councilmember Glover's bill, which bans scooters in Nashville. And then he deferred it to the last meeting in August, which will be the last meeting of this council term. And so they're either going to come up with some type of, moderation in terms of leave them here, but reduce the size and figure out some additional enforcement, or they've got a backup bill over here that says we're going to ban the whole thing. I don't know what's going to happen, but they've got two different options sitting there, so we'll see.
Well, we're nearing the conclusion of the interview. Is there any topic that we haven't discussed that you'd like to talk about?
The only thing I was going to mention was I said there were three things that I would like to do if I return. One was to inform and educate. The other two are related, and this would come about early on, and it's to talk to council members and say, what is it that you want to achieve in this 4-year term? What do you actually want to do? And it can't be, I want to solve affordable housing. That's a wonderful goal. But I'm not sure if you can do it in 4 years. I mean, unless we all start just building homes and we do it that way. I want to make our educational programs the best they can be. Okay, that's a lofty goal. What does that mean? I think the idea is to narrow the focus of council members and say specifically, what are your goals? What do you want to do? If it's we need to build 1,000 affordable housing units each year for the next 4 years. That's a goal that you can actually measure. So the idea is to start trying to figure out what are those goals, and then the second part of all that is to keep going back behind it and saying, okay, this is what you want to do. After 1 year of this council term, let's see where we are. So we actually have some measurements to what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Going back to your question about how do you get to the public and make them feel more comfortable in government, I think you set some standards. I mean, first of all, you want ethical standards, but I think you also have to set some standards on what you want to achieve. And I mean, saying that we want great education, we all want that. But what does that mean? Does it mean we specifically want money into the schools so that the teachers don't have to pay out of pocket for supplies? That might be a really good thing. If that's a goal, let's put it down, and then let's keep sticking to those goals and see how we are. The goals can always be modified a little bit, but I think it's important to know what we want to achieve and as a body, and then go see if we can get those things done. And that's what I'd like to do.
Very good. And at this time, what I'd like to do is give you the opportunity to look at our viewers in the camera and tell them why you want their vote, and also how they can contact you if they want to learn more about you.
So Jim Shulman, I'm your vice mayor right now. It's been an honor to serve for the last 10, 11 months, and I'd like to come back for a full 4-year term. The three goals: inform, educate the voters, make sure the council has what it needs. 2, want to set goals for the council so that we actually start achieving and bring confidence back into government. And 3, measure those goals and figure out if we actually are obtaining those goals in the end. Jim Shulman, you can reach me at jdshulman@comcast.net, J.D. Shulman, S-H-U-L-M-A-N, @comcast.net. And my cell phone number is 615-584-1082. And you're always welcome to come to the council meetings. We encourage everybody to come. We meet the first and third Tuesdays of the month, 6:30 p.m. Metro Courthouse. And we usually cover parking. We have a little parking voucher. So if you have an issue or if you just want to see how your government works, please come.
I want to thank Vice Mayor Shulman, and we want to thank our viewers. This is part of a public service by the Tennessean, so that you can get to know your county-wide candidates for mayor, vice mayor, and metro council at large races. Today is July 12th, the start of early voting for the August 1st election. You have until July 27th within this early voting period, and of course, August 1st is your last chance. Your vote is your voice. Please go and vote. Do your public service as a citizen. And we thank all the candidates. You can replay these videos on Tennessean.com and find other elections-related materials at elections.tennessean.com. Thank you.